The sun blazed down on the sprawling estate of the Whitmore family, where white roses cascaded from golden arches, champagne towers sparkled in the light, and laughter echoed across manicured lawns. Every guest was dressed to impress: designer gowns, flawless makeup, sleek tuxedos, and rehearsed smiles. The wedding of Ava Whitmore, the socialite darling of the Hamptons, was the event of the season. But standing awkwardly near the back of the bridal party was a woman who looked like she didn't belong. Callie Monroe fidgeted with the sleeves of her bridesmaid dress, the satin clinging too tightly in the wrong places and drooping where it should have hugged. The pale lilac color clashed with her fair skin, and the shoes, oh, the shoes, felt like tiny torture chambers with heels. She had borrowed them from Ava's sister, 2 sizes too small, and every step was agony. Her hair was pulled back into a messy low bun, and behind her thick-rimmed glasses, her hazel eyes remained hidden, unseen. She hadn't had the money or the time for a makeover, not that anyone cared. Whispers followed her like shadows. "Who let the librarian in the bridal party?" One woman smirked, sipping from her flute. "She's Ava's cousin. The poor one, I think," another replied under her breath, chuckling. Callie heard them. She always did. The laughter, the stares, the way people looked through her like she was furniture in the background. But she smiled anyway, the kind of smile that stretches just enough to hide the sting. She had only agreed to be a bridesmaid because Ava had begged her last minute when one of her friends bailed. It was supposed to be an honor, but now it felt like a punishment. Across the marble floor of the reception hall, Landon Reid leaned against a column, his blue eyes scanning the room with practiced boredom. The millionaire tech mogul was the type of man who owned every room he walked into. Tall, striking, with jet black hair that always seemed perfectly tousled, and a jawline that made stylists swoon. He had been best friends with Ava's groom since college, and half the single women at the wedding had been hoping he'd notice them. Instead, Landon's gaze landed on Callie. He arched a brow. "Who's that?" he asked Carter, the groom. Carter smirked. "That's Callie, Ava's cousin, the backup bridesmaid." "She looks like she walked out of a thrift store," another groomsman snorted. Landon chuckled. $500 says I can get her to dance." Carter laughed. "You're on." It wasn't malice, not really. For Landon, it was just amusement. Another fleeting moment to pass the time. He straightened his jacket, grabbed a flute of champagne, and crossed the room, weaving through swirls of tulle and perfume. Callie was trying to make herself invisible near the chocolate fountain when she heard the unmistakable voice. "Care for a dance?" She turned and nearly dropped her drink. Landon Reid, standing there in his custom tuxedo, smirking like a scene out of a movie. She blinked, stunned. Was he talking to her? Are you sure?" she stammered. "Very sure," he said smoothly, holding out his hand. "I need a break from all the models." She hesitated, glancing around. People were already watching, judging, probably betting on how long before she tripped or embarrassed herself. But something in his voice, a lazy charm, a trace of humor, nudged her forward. With trembling fingers, she placed her hand in his. As they moved to the center of the dance floor, the music shifted to a soft piano melody. Callie's heart pounded. Landon's touch was firm but gentle, and despite the murmurs around them, he smiled as if none of it mattered. "So, Callie Monroe," he said, spinning her lightly. "What brings you to this glamorous event?" She tried to laugh. "A guilty cousin and a canceled bridesmaid." He grinned. "Lucky me, then." She looked up sharply. Was he mocking her? But his eyes, deep blue and oddly sincere, met hers without flinching. For a moment, something inside her softened. The crowd whispered louder now, some giggling, some sneering. "She's actually dancing with him? This is gold! Someone record this!" Callie felt her throat tighten. She shouldn't have agreed. This was a setup. She was the joke. Of course she was. "I should go," she whispered, pulling her hand back. But just as she turned to walk away, Landon caught her wrist, not roughly, but firmly. "Wait," he said, his voice quieter, confused. "What just happened?" Callie looked into his eyes, tears threatening. I'm not your bet, Mr. Reid. I know when I'm being laughed at. She yanked away and hurried off the floor, heels stabbing her feet, heart aching. Landon stood there, stunned. For the first time in years, the joke didn't feel funny. It felt like regret. At first, Landon moved out of habit, his hand resting on the small of her back, guiding her in time with the soft swell of the music. He'd danced with a dozen women at weddings before, often half distracted, his mind elsewhere. Tonight had felt no different, until she looked up. It happened in the middle of a spin, Callie's hand in his, her steps unsure but light. When she turned back to face him, her hazel eyes lifted. And for the first time, Landon really saw her. Not the crooked glasses, not the too tight dress or the awkward posture. He saw her, and it stole his breath. Her eyes were a soft gold flecked with green, shimmering beneath the chandelier's light like a secret forest hidden behind dusty glass. Her cheeks flushed a natural pink, not from blush but from nerves and something painfully sincere. Her lips trembled with the tiniest smile, unsure, unpolished, real. There was something in the way she moved too. She wasn't graceful like a ballroom dancer, but she had this raw, hesitant elegance, like someone who had never been taught how to shine, but still carried a quiet light. Landon's smirk faded. He forgot about the bet, forgot the groomsmen watching from the edge of the dance floor, forgot the judgmental whispers floating like poison through the room. All he could see was her. Callie, however, wasn't seeing the same thing. She saw the stares, the curled lips, the phone subtly raised. She could feel the laughter bubbling behind perfect white teeth, the pity disguised as politeness, the disbelief on Ava's face, and she realized, too late, what this moment really was: a performance, not a dance. Her throat tightened. The music no longer sounded romantic, just mocking. She lowered her gaze to his chest, hiding her expression, praying for the song to end. Her feet ached. Her heart pounded in a rhythm that didn't match the melody. And when Landon's grip softened slightly, her instincts screamed, "Get out! Leave!" before they laughed louder. Then came the moment that broke her. One of the bridesmaids, Ava's friend, tall and glittering in silver, whispered too loudly, "I didn't know Landon danced with charity cases." The words sliced through her like glass. Callie's chest constricted. She pulled her hand from his. "I'm sorry," she muttered, stepping back. Landon blinked. "What? Wait!" But she was already turning, her face pale, eyes wide with humiliation. She walked quickly, pushing through the crowd, past gasps and murmurs, past laughter that burned like acid on her skin. She didn't stop until she reached the bathroom, slamming the door behind her and locking it. Inside, she braced herself against the sink, staring at her reflection, her messy hair, the too big glasses, the dress that wrinkled in the wrong places. Her fingers trembled as she took off the heels and placed them on the tile. Tears blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall. "I should have never said yes, never believed even for a second that he saw me." Meanwhile, back on the dance floor, Landon stood frozen. The music played on, but he didn't move. Something shifted inside him, an ache he didn't recognize. Guilt, confusion, intrigue. The groomsmen laughed, nudging him like boys at a frat party. "Man, you didn't even have to finish the song. That's cold." Landon didn't answer. He turned toward the exit Callie had fled through. He didn't follow. Not yet. He was too rattled. What the hell just happened? He had danced with countless women, supermodels, heiresses, actresses, women who wore their beauty like a crown and never looked twice at anyone below their social rung. But none of them had ever looked at him the way she had, like she was bracing herself for heartbreak before the dance even began. Like she knew it was a joke and dared to hope it wasn't. Why did she leave like that? It wasn't pride that made him want answers. It was something more complex, a tug in his chest, a curiosity he couldn't shake, a need to know who Callie Monroe really was. Because in that one dance, something about her disarmed him. And for the first time in years, Landon Reid felt like he was the one being watched. Not with envy or admiration, but with quiet, devastating honesty. a kind of truth he hadn't felt in years. The skyline outside Landon Reid's penthouse stretched wide and glittering, but for the first time in years, it looked dull to him. He stood barefoot in front of the massive floor-to-ceiling window, hands shoved into the pockets of his tailored slacks, nursing a drink he hadn't sipped in hours. He had returned from the wedding to a world of luxury, glass walls, modern art, chilled champagne, but it all felt cold, empty. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Callie Monroe. That name lingered in his mind like a whisper caught in the wind, impossible to shake. He didn't even know how he remembered it. Maybe from the seating chart? Maybe Ava had mentioned it once, dismissively. She wasn't supposed to matter. Just a plain bridesmaid he danced with out of boredom. A harmless joke. But now her eyes haunted him. That flicker of vulnerability, that silent heartbreak right before she slipped away. He had seen it in people before, mostly when he was younger, before the money, before the power. It was a look that came from being overlooked, from being laughed at and pretending it didn't hurt. And for reasons he couldn't explain, it gutted him. Landon tried to distract himself. He opened emails, skimmed contracts, paced through his penthouse. He even called his assistant to discuss a potential investment. But every moment was a fight against the memory of her warm hazel eyes, the tremble in her voice when she whispered, "I'm sorry," before leaving him on the dance floor. Meanwhile, across the city, Callie was back to her usual life. The clatter of dishes, the buzz of coffee machines, and the scent of burnt toast surrounded her as she worked the evening shift at Miller's Diner. A cozy little place tucked between a gas station and a laundromat. She wore her hair tied back in a loose ponytail and kept her glasses low on her nose. Her uniform was old but neat, and her white sneakers were scuffed at the edges. She smiled politely, took orders, poured refills, but her heart wasn't in it, not after last night. Every time she blinked, she saw his face. That smirk at first. Then the way his eyes changed mid-dance. Just a little. And for one foolish moment, she'd believed something had shifted between them. But she knew better now. Men like Landon Reid don't notice girls like me. Not for real. Not when the spotlight fades. He probably went back to his penthouse, laughed about it with his model friends, and never thought of her again. She sighed, scribbling down an order for a family of 4 at booth 7. The bell over the door jingled. She didn't even look up at first. She was used to the regulars, truck drivers, retired couples, teenagers in search of fries and milkshakes. But when she turned to grab a menu and glanced toward the entrance, her breath caught. There he was, Landon Reid, in her diner, wearing a crisp navy sweater over a white collar, designer jeans, and that same tousled hair she remembered from the wedding. His blue eyes swept the diner casually until they landed on her. Callie froze. Was she hallucinating? He walked toward the counter like he belonged there, like the chrome stools and sticky menus weren't worlds beneath him. "Evening," he said, sliding onto a stool and glancing at the coffee machine. "Got anything that doesn't taste like motor oil?" Callie stared. "You're here?" His smirk curved, but this time it wasn't mocking. "Last I checked, this place serves food to everyone?" She felt her cheeks heat. "No, I mean, what are you doing here?" Landon shrugged, tapping his fingers against the counter like he wasn't nervous. But he was. "God, what am I even doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood," he lied. "Figured I'd grab some caffeine." Callie arched an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "There's a cafe across the street, with better lighting, and way better coffee." He leaned forward slightly, his voice lower now. "Yeah, but they don't have you." Her heart stuttered. This had to be a joke. Some kind of twisted follow-up to that awful bet. She forced a smile. "Look, if you're here to continue whatever that was at the wedding, I'm not interested in being a punchline again." Landon's expression sobered. "I'm not here to laugh at you, Callie." Her name on his lips felt different this time. Gentler, less polished. She hesitated, unsure whether to believe him. "You barely know me," she said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. "True," he nodded. "But I'd like to." A moment of silence passed between them. The clinking of forks and soft hum of a jukebox filled the background, but for a heartbeat, it felt like the whole diner had quieted around them. Finally, Callie took a shaky breath and reached for the coffee pot. She poured him a cup and slid it across the counter. "You're still drinking motor oil," she said softly. Landon lifted the mug, smiling as he took a sip. "Good," he replied. "That's exactly what I came for." The days passed, and Landon found himself returning to the diner more often than he'd ever expected. At first, it was just a coffee, then a croissant. Soon it was simple, casual conversations, chit-chat about the weather, complaints about how awful the coffee was, but always with an undercurrent of something deeper, something real. At first, Callie had been skeptical. She was used to men showing interest because they saw her as a challenge or because they wanted something she couldn't give. Landon wasn't any different. He was rich, confident, and surrounded by people who lived in worlds completely detached from hers. But as the days passed, she started noticing the little things. He always sat at the counter, never taking the better booths. He tipped well, not because he was rich, but because he was thoughtful. He asked her how her day was, actually listening to the answer. And most of all, there was something in the way he didn't look at her like everyone else did. There were no pitying glances or awkward silences, just quiet understanding and a willingness to engage with her on a level that felt, dare she think it, genuine. It was one cold evening when it happened. Callie had just finished wiping down the counter when she saw him standing near the door, shuffling his feet as though he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how to begin. Landon's gaze met hers, and for a brief moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of them. "Want to take a walk?" he asked, his voice casual but with an undertone of something deeper. Callie's heart skipped a beat. A walk? In the dead of night? In the chill of winter? Surrounded by the hum of empty streets? She hesitated. "A walk? Now?" "Yeah." He shrugged, hands shoved into his coat pockets, eyes twinkling. "I mean, you said this place has the best coffee in town, so I'd hate to miss out on a good conversation with the most interesting person I've met." Callie smirked. "You really know how to make a girl feel special, don't you?" He grinned back, his eyes warm and earnest. "I try." There was a beat of silence, and then she nodded, picking up her coat and tossing her apron behind the counter. She couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the weight of the last few days, the way he'd somehow made her feel like she mattered. Or maybe it was the fact that despite everything, despite the difference in their worlds, he genuinely seemed to care. They stepped outside, and the cold night air bit at their skin. The stars above sparkled, but the city lights masked most of the sky, leaving everything bathed in a soft, artificial glow. They walked in silence for a while, the crunch of snow beneath their boots the only sound. As they turned a corner, Callie spoke first. "I'm not the kind of girl you're used to hanging around with, you know?" Landon raised an eyebrow. "How do you figure?" She shrugged, her breath fogging in the air. "You live in a world where people pay to see their names in headlines. I just serve coffee." He stopped walking and faced her, his expression serious for the first time that evening. "Callie, I don't care about headlines," he said softly. "I care about you." Her breath caught in her throat, but she quickly forced a smile. "Right, well, I'm sure it's just a passing interest for you. A little fun before you get bored and go back to your real life." Landon took a step forward, his eyes piercing into hers. "You think I'm here because I'm bored?" "I don't know why you're here," she said, her voice tight, "but I'm not going to let you waste your time on someone like me. I've seen men like you, rich, successful, with their whole world at their feet. And I've seen what happens when they decide to throw their attention on girls like me. We're a temporary distraction, nothing more." He shook his head slowly, his jaw clenched. "I'm not like them, Callie. I'm not here to waste your time. I'm here because I like spending time with you. I like getting to know you. You matter to me." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She had always been careful. She'd learned to keep her walls up. Her mother's illness, her struggles with work, the suffocating weight of loneliness that no one ever seemed to understand. And now this. Landon Reid was everything she was supposed to stay away from. He could have anyone. He could have the perfect woman, the high society woman, someone who fit into his life without question, but not her. You don't understand, she whispered, looking away. My mom's sick. I've got bills to pay. I don't have time for someone like you who plays with people's hearts for fun. Landon's expression softened, and his voice dropped to a near whisper. Callie, I'm not here to play games. I'm here because I want to know you, because I'm starting to realize that everything I've been looking for might be someone who's not in the same world I come from. Callie's stomach twisted. She wanted to believe him, wanted to open herself up to the possibility, but the scar of her past still stung. She couldn't fall into the same trap again. I'm not the type of girl you need, Landon, she said quietly, her words thick with emotion. And you're not the kind of man I can trust. He reached for her hand, gently lifting it to his lips. You don't have to trust me right away, but just give me a chance, Callie. You don't know what could happen if you let me in. Her heart beat erratically, and for the first time, she allowed herself to breathe in his sincerity. But deep down, a voice warned her. Don't fall. Don't fall for someone who has everything but wants what you can't give. She pulled her hand back, forcing a light-hearted laugh. We should get back to the diner before I turn into an ice cube. Landon didn't press her. He simply nodded, but the unspoken promise between them lingered. As they walked back through the silent streets, he could feel the weight of her words, and he knew deep down that he wasn't ready to walk away. It was the night of the gala, and Callie felt as though she was finally breaking free from the walls she had built around her heart. Slowly, with each conversation and shared walk, Landon had chipped away at her defenses. The way his eyes lingered on her, the tenderness in his voice when he spoke to her, made her believe that maybe, just maybe, this was real. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different life. A life where she wasn't just a waitress at a rundown diner, but a woman who was seen for who she truly was. Someone worth loving. But the world had a cruel way of shattering dreams. It all started with a notification on her phone. Callie had been serving coffee at the counter when the buzz of her phone pierced through the low hum of conversation. She glanced at the screen, expecting to see a message from her mom, but what she saw made her blood run cold. A video. The thumbnail showed Landon, looking slightly disheveled, his blue eyes sparkling with what could only be described as mischief. Her heart dropped before the video even played. She clicked it. And then the world stopped. The video opened to a dark room, a few voices blurred in the background. Landon was there, laughing along with his friends. His words slurred. The camera was shaky, but it didn't take long for the words to hit Callie with the force of a punch. Well, I'll admit, I thought she was an easy bet, Landon's friend Rick said through a drunken chuckle. You know, the plain bridesmaid. The awkward one. You should have seen her face when Landon asked her to dance. It was all part of the joke, man. Just a stupid dare. He's always the life of the party, making a fool of himself. And you should have seen her. She actually thought he liked her. Callie's hands trembled as the video continued, each word chipping away at her. Landon laughed along with his friends, but the laughter was hollow in her ears now. Her mind couldn't process it fast enough. Was this what he had been hiding? Was it all just a game to him? The video ended with Rick and another friend laughing about how easy it was to pull off the joke. Callie's stomach twisted, the room around her spinning as she read the comments underneath the video. Hundreds of them, mocking her, calling her the joke, the fool, the one who thought she mattered. Her hand fell limply to her side as the tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't have time to let them fall. Her legs moved before her brain could catch up, and she found herself outside the diner in a blur, rushing to the one place she could think of, Landon's penthouse. The night air slapped her face as she drove, but it barely registered. Her heart beat wildly in her chest, and all she could think of was the way she'd allowed herself to fall for him. She arrived at his building, her mind clouded with pain, and walked straight to the elevators. Each step felt heavy, like a weight pulling her down into the depths of despair. She pressed the button for his floor, waiting, praying for the courage to face him, to confront him. When the elevator doors opened, Landon was waiting in the hallway, as if he knew she would come. His expression faltered as he saw her, and he stepped forward. Callie, No. she interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. I saw the video, Landon. I heard it. I heard him say it. Landon's face paled. He froze in place, and his mouth opened, but no words came out. The guilt and regret in his eyes were palpable, but Callie couldn't look at him. She couldn't. Tell me it's not true, she demanded, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. Tell me you didn't make a joke out of me. Tell me it was just some stupid prank. Tell me I didn't mean nothing to you, just like the rest of them. Landon took a step forward, his hands raised in a pleading gesture. Callie, please listen to me. That was before I realized, before I understood how I felt. That wasn't about you. I swear to God, that wasn't about you. I was distracted. I was distracted, she echoed bitterly. You called it a joke. A dare, she laughed through the tears, shaking her head. You don't get it, do you? You don't get how much that hurt. I gave you my trust, Landon. I let you in, and you mocked me. You made me feel like a fool, like I was just some pathetic girl you could laugh at. His eyes darkened, guilt flooding his features. I never meant to hurt you, Callie. I never wanted to make you feel like that. The way I feel about you now, that's real. I swear it is. I can't take back what happened. But please, don't let that one stupid thing ruin everything we could have. She backed away, holding up her hands to stop him from coming any closer. You don't get it, she repeated, her voice breaking. I can't do this. I can't keep pretending that you care about me when you don't. You don't know what it's like to be the one they laugh at, to be the one who's left behind. You? She choked on her words, her breath catching in her throat. You don't get to come here and tell me that now you care. Not after what I saw. Landon reached out again, but Callie stepped back, shaking her head. I'm done. You're just like everyone else. You'll never really see me, Landon. You'll never really know what it's like to be me. With one last heart-wrenching look at him, she turned and walked away, her heart shattered, her trust completely gone. Landon stood there, rooted to the spot, watching her disappear into the night, his chest tight with regret. But no matter how much he tried to stop her, no matter how much he begged in his mind, it was too late. He had lost her. Landon couldn't understand what had happened. One minute, Callie was standing before him, angry but real, someone he could finally be honest with, someone who made him feel alive. The next minute, she was gone, disappeared without a trace, and every attempt he made to find her only dug the hole deeper. He had started by checking the diner, hoping she'd come back, but the worn-out closed sign on the door greeted him every time. Each time, his heart sank just a little more. He drove around the old neighborhoods, past the small apartment buildings, the rundown streets where she had once lived. But every time he reached her street, his chest tightened with anxiety, only to find that she was nowhere in sight. He had even tried calling her phone over and over, but each time it rang once before going to voicemail. She wasn't answering. He had texted her, sent apologies, and begged her to just talk to him, but still, no response. She had vanished as though she never existed in his life. Desperate, Landon turned to the one person who might know where she was, her cousin, Emma. She had always been Callie's closest family, and maybe, just maybe, she could give him some answer. But when he called her, Emma's voice was cold, distant. She left, Landon. She's done with you. Her words hit him harder than anything else. He hadn't expected her to be angry at him, but he should have known. Callie had always been protective of her space, her boundaries. She'd warned him that rich men didn't stay, and he'd crossed the line. Now he was paying the price. Months passed, but each day felt like a weight he couldn't shake off. The lavish parties, the business deals, nothing interested him anymore. He turned down offers that should have excited him, lost his appetite for success, and even the glossy faces of the models who begged for his attention felt like a cruel reminder of what he had lost. It wasn't just Callie's absence that haunted him. It was the way she made him feel, the way her gentle smile had captivated him, the way she had taught him to see beyond the surface, to look for something deeper in people. He wasn't used to feeling vulnerable, to feeling like he had something to lose, but with her he had. And now with her gone, it was a hole that couldn't be filled. He found himself waking up at odd hours, his mind racing, wondering where she was. if she was safe, if she was happy. His thoughts would linger on her laugh, her quiet strength, the way she would get lost in books at the diner, the way her eyes would light up when she talked about her mother. He remembered the late-night walks when she had shared her world with him, her dreams, her hopes, and the way she had confided in him, letting him in when she hadn't let anyone else before. But now those memories only twisted the knife deeper. Landon's colleagues had started to notice the change in him. His assistant, Maria, commented one afternoon as he turned down another business deal. "Landon, you don't look like yourself. What's going on? You've missed 3 dinners this week, and you're not even returning calls anymore. We need you at the meetings. You can't keep going like this." He barely acknowledged her, lost in his thoughts, his mind replaying the night they had met again at that wedding, when he had first touched her hand. The feel of her skin had sent a shock through him, a connection he had never expected. And now that connection was severed. He found himself walking past the high-end shops he used to frequent, the models' faces in the windows, the glossy world that he had always been part of. But none of it mattered anymore. He didn't want it. He didn't want any of it. All he could think about was Callie. One night, while he sat at home, staring at his empty glass of whiskey, he finally made a decision. He wouldn't let her slip away from him like this. He had to find her. There had to be something, some way to make things right. So he made the calls. He reached out to every charity he knew that she might be involved with, offering donations in her name just to get a trace of her. He even contacted a private investigator, someone who could track her down, find out where she was hiding. But everything came up empty. Weeks turned into months. Time dragged on, and Landon started to feel like a shell of the man he used to be. He stopped attending parties, stopped answering business calls, and even his friends noticed the shift. The sharp, confident businessman had become a shadow of himself. The loneliness settled in deep. He thought about her all the time, about the way she had made him laugh, the way she had been so patient with him, how she had challenged everything he thought he knew about love, about life. But now, with her absence looming over him, he felt like he was suffocating. And then one evening, as the cold winter air cut through the streets, Landon stood at the window of his penthouse, staring out at the skyline. The city lights flickered in the distance, a blur of movement and noise. But inside him, there was nothing but silence. His phone vibrated on the counter, but he didn't bother to check it. Nothing mattered anymore. It wasn't until months later, while he was in a meeting with a potential business partner, that he heard the news. Someone had mentioned her name, as casually as if it were just another piece of gossip. Callie Monroe had left town. She had moved somewhere quiet, far from everything, and no one had heard from her since. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. It wasn't a surprise. In his heart, he knew she had done what she had to do to protect herself. But knowing she was out there, somewhere far away, was a sharp reminder of his failure. He ran his hand through his hair, his mind spinning with frustration and regret. He had pushed her away, hadn't he? In the end, he had been just like everyone else. He had taken her for granted, but he couldn't give up. Not now. Not when it hurt this much. And so, the search continued. Landon wasn't sure why he had agreed to attend the charity gala. His presence had become a mere formality, a way to maintain his reputation, to remind the world that he was still the same successful millionaire they all knew. But deep down, he had no real interest in the art, the auctions, or the flashing cameras. He had been going through the motions for months now, as if life were just a series of events he had to show up for. But that night, something pulled him into the gallery's inner rooms, something more than the flashy displays of wealth and status. The room was softly lit, with walls adorned by beautiful, abstract pieces, colorful brush strokes that seemed to tell stories, evoking emotions Landon wasn't prepared to feel. His eyes drifted from one painting to another, his mind half-focused on the conversation around him, until something stopped him dead in his tracks. There, at the far end of the room, was a painting that felt familiar. It wasn't just the brush strokes that tugged at his heart. It was the expression, the depth in the colors, the haunting story it seemed to tell. The canvas was mostly dark shades, with splashes of red, white, and blue, swirling together in a dance of chaos. In the center, a figure stood, one arm raised, as if caught in the middle of a moment of vulnerability, a moment of surrender. The title of the piece caught his eye, and his breath caught in his chest. The Man Who Danced with a Joke. Landon's heart stuttered as the memories rushed back. That night, the wedding, the dance, everything he had felt in that fleeting moment when he first touched her hand. He knew it, without a shadow of a doubt. This was her work. This was Callie's. The brushstrokes told a story of pain and confusion, of hurt hidden beneath the surface. It was as if the painting had captured the exact moment when she had fled from him in that ballroom, the moment when everything between them had gone wrong. Her heartbreak, his regret, all of it was laid bare in this one piece of art. He stepped closer, drawn in by the overwhelming emotion that radiated from the canvas. His fingers ached with the need to reach out, to touch the painting, to somehow connect with her again through the work she had created. He could feel her presence in every line, every color. She had poured herself into this painting, into this story, just as she had once poured herself into him, into the moments they had shared. "Isn't it incredible?" a voice interrupted, snapping him out of his trance. Landon turned to see the curator standing beside him, a soft smile on her face. "That one's titled The Man Who Danced with a Joke. It's one of the most poignant pieces we've had in years. You can see the raw emotion in every stroke. The artist's name is Callie Monroe." Callie Monroe. The name felt like a punch to his gut. Landon's heart raced, and he had to fight to keep his composure. He wasn't sure if it was the sheer beauty of the painting or the realization that Callie had been behind this stunning piece of art that was making his chest tighten, but he couldn't take his eyes off it. "The artist," he managed to say, his voice hoarse. "Is she here?" The curator's smile faltered, as if she had heard that question before. She's been a bit reclusive lately. She sold a few pieces here and there, but she's not one for the spotlight. I don't even know where she's living now." Landon's heart pounded in his ears. His fingers clenched into fists at his sides. The last time he had heard her name, it was accompanied by a sharp, painful memory of her walking away from him, cutting him off from her life. Now he was standing in front of the only tangible piece of her left in this world. Her art. The one thing that connected them after everything had fallen apart. He turned back to the painting, a mix of awe and desperation flooding his senses. "How much?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The curator seemed surprised by his sudden urgency, but smiled knowingly. "The entire collection, if you're interested," she offered, motioning to the other paintings on the wall, which were just as stunning and personal as the one that had stopped him in his tracks. "It's all for charity. Every piece was donated by the artist to raise funds for a cause she's passionate about. But I'll warn you, it's not cheap. These works have a lot of sentimental value, not just to the artist, but to the collectors who've shown interest." Landon's jaw tightened. He didn't care about the price. He would have paid anything to own every piece of her, to have a part of Callie back in his life. "I want them all," he said without hesitation. "Every single one." The curator's eyes widened, but she nodded quickly, clearly flattered by his interest. "I'll arrange everything for you, Mr. Reid. We'll have the pieces delivered to your office tomorrow." Landon barely heard her as he nodded absently, his mind already 1,000 miles away, imagining Callie's hands holding the paintbrush, lost in the creative process that had produced these breathtaking works. The paintings were more than just art. They were pieces of her soul, pieces of the woman he had hurt and the woman he couldn't let go. When the deal was finalized, Landon found himself standing there, in that gallery, surrounded by works that would forever remind him of Callie. The room felt suddenly empty without her, but there was a sense of purpose that filled him too. If these paintings were the only connection he had left to her, then he would cherish them. But more than that, he would find her. He had to. And this time, he wasn't going to let her slip away. The salty breeze of the ocean swept through Landon's hair as he stepped out of the black SUV, the tires crunching on the gravel of the secluded seaside road. He hadn't been prepared for the way this place felt. Isolated, tranquil, as if the world had stopped turning in this quiet corner of the coast. It was as if time had stood still here, just as it had in his heart since the moment Callie had walked out of his life. But now he was here, standing on the edge of something that could either heal him or break him completely. The art studio before him was small, with large windows that looked out over the crashing waves below. It was tucked away in a corner of the beach, far from the high-end galleries and flashy parties he was used to. The outside of the building was painted in faded pastels, a blend of colors that reminded him of the soft tones of the paintings he'd bought, as if everything here was meant to be peaceful, untouched by the chaos of the world outside. He walked up the wooden steps, each one creaking beneath his weight, and hesitated at the door. His pulse raced in his veins. This was it, the moment that could change everything, or destroy it forever. Landon took a deep breath, steadied himself, and pushed the door open. Inside, the studio smelled of paint and aged wood, the scent comforting, grounding. The room was filled with large canvases, each one brimming with color and emotion. And in the center of it all, there she was, Callie Monroe. She stood with her back to him, working on a canvas, her long hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her figure was more defined now, her posture stronger, more confident. But there was something different in the way she moved, something distant. Her grace was still there, but it was guarded, as though she was protecting herself from the world. The moment she heard the door open, she froze. Landon could see the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her body stiffened at the sound of his footsteps. Slowly she turned, her eyes meeting his. For a second, neither of them spoke. Callie's gaze flickered over him, and Landon felt the weight of everything he had done to her in that one glance. The hurt, the betrayal, the trust she had once given him and lost. Her eyes were still soft, still warm, but they were guarded now, as though she had built walls to protect herself from him. "Landon," she said, her voice low, almost too calm. "Callie," he replied, his voice raw with emotion. He stepped into the room slowly, cautiously, as if afraid that any sudden movement would shatter the fragile peace that hung in the air between them. She crossed her arms over her chest, watching him with a quiet intensity. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone still steady, though there was a flicker of something deeper in her eyes. Was it hope? Fear? Landon swallowed hard. He had thought about what he would say to her 1,000 times, but now that he was standing here, the words didn't come easily. He had to make her understand. He had to make her see that he wasn't the man who had laughed at her, the man who had let her go. "I've made so many mistakes, Callie," he started, his voice thick with regret. "I've been miserable without you. I can't stop thinking about you, about us, what we had, what I ruined." He took a step closer, his eyes not leaving hers. "I don't want that life anymore. I don't want the parties, the business deals, the distractions. I want you." Callie didn't move. Her face was impassive, but Landon could see the faint tremor in her fingers as she tightened her grip on her arms. "You can't just say things like that, Landon," she replied, her voice sharp. But there was a sadness there, too. "You can't just walk back into my life after everything you've done, after everything that's happened." Landon's heart clenched. He had expected this, but the sting of her words still cut deep. "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't deserve a second chance. I don't deserve anything. But I've spent the last few months thinking about you, about how wrong I was. I've been so lost without you, Callie. I've realized that I love you, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything." Callie turned away, her gaze falling to the floor, her body tense with emotion. "You don't get it, do you? You can't just fix everything with an apology," she said quietly. "You hurt me, Landon. You humiliated me. I trusted you, and you—" Her voice trailed off, the pain from the past echoing in the silence. Landon's heart shattered. He wanted to reach out, to touch her, but he didn't dare. He couldn't push her. He needed to show her, to prove to her that he was different now, that he was willing to fight for her. I know I can't just fix it, but I can prove it. I can show you that I'm not that man anymore. I've changed, Callie. I've made mistakes, but I'm not going to run from them anymore. I'm here because I want you. I want a life with you, if you'll have me." There was a long silence, and Landon could hear his own breath, shallow and heavy, as he waited for her to speak. Callie finally turned back toward him, her face softening, though her eyes remained cautious. "I still love you, Landon," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "But I don't know if I can trust you again. After everything, you hurt me too much." Landon's chest tightened. He had been so sure that she would forgive him, that they could start over. But now he saw the doubt in her eyes, the fear that held her back. "I'll earn your trust, Callie. I'll spend the rest of my life earning it. I just need you to give me a chance." Callie looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She was torn, caught between the love they had shared and the pain he had caused. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she let out a slow breath. "I don't know if I'm ready for that, Landon," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'll think about it." Landon's heart soared, even though he knew they weren't there yet. But he had taken the first step, and for the first time in months, he allowed himself to hope. "I'll wait," he said simply. "I'll wait for as long as it takes." Landon was driving through the storm with his thoughts tangled in the memory of his conversation with Callie. The rain was relentless, slashing against his windshield, distorting the world into blurry shadows. The road, slick with water, was becoming increasingly treacherous. But he wasn't thinking about the weather. He was thinking about her, about Callie. His mind kept replaying her words. "I'll think about it." He knew it wasn't a promise, but it was a sliver of hope, something he'd been starving for since that moment he'd hurt her. As much as he hated to admit it, the thought of losing her again was a weight on his chest that he couldn't bear. The wind picked up, gusting around him, pushing his car slightly to the left. Landon's hands gripped the wheel tighter, but the storm was relentless. His headlights flickered once, twice before they dimmed completely. A strange silence settled over him as the engine sputtered, but before he could react, his tires hit a slick patch of road. The car fishtailed. For a split second, Landon's instincts kicked in, but it was too late. The car swerved uncontrollably, skidding across the wet pavement. His heart raced as his surroundings blurred. He saw the flashing of lights, red and blue, before his car collided violently with a tree. The world went dark. Callie was on her phone scrolling through a social media post, her mind still tangled in thoughts of Landon, when her world was abruptly interrupted. A headline caught her eye. "Local millionaire in car accident during storm." The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. Her breath caught, and she felt the panic set in instantly. The article mentioned the accident had occurred on the exact route Landon had been traveling after visiting her. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and rushed out of the diner, her pulse racing. She had to get to him. The hospital. She had to be there. Her heart hammered in her chest as she navigated through the chaos of the rain-soaked streets. The thoughts swirling in her mind were almost too much to bear. Was he okay? Was it serious? By the time Callie arrived at the hospital, the waiting room was filled with anxious families, but she barely noticed them. She rushed to the front desk, her voice shaking as she asked for information. The nurse, recognizing the urgency in her voice, guided her quickly to a private room where Landon's unconscious form lay, hooked up to machines. The sight of him so still, so vulnerable, made her chest tighten. She hesitated for a moment at the door, watching him from a distance. His face was pale, his body battered from the crash. The sterile smell of the hospital filled the air, but it did little to quell the tightness in her throat. The walls she'd built to protect herself, those impenetrable walls that had kept her distant from him, seemed to crumble as she took a slow, shaky breath. Sitting beside him, she took his hand, gently brushing the strands of hair from his forehead. Her heart ached at the thought of what might have happened if she hadn't come. What if she had lost him forever? She had always thought she'd be okay without him. She had told herself she didn't need him. But now, sitting in this sterile room, her emotions flooded her, feelings she had buried deep. The silence was broken by the soft beep of the heart monitor. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as she held his hand, willing him to wake up. Minutes turned into hours. She stared at him, unsure if she could stand seeing him like this, fragile and broken. Her thoughts kept turning back to the night he'd walked away from her, how she had pushed him away in anger. But now, seeing him like this, vulnerable, weak. Everything changed. Her thoughts were interrupted when the monitor beeped louder, signaling a shift. Callie's breath caught as she leaned in closer, her heart racing. Landon's eyelids fluttered. "Landon," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but there was something in the softness of her words that made him stir. His hand twitched, and then slowly, his blue eyes opened. It took him a moment to focus, to adjust to the light, but when he saw her, when he recognized her face, a slow, exhausted smile crept onto his lips. "Callie?" His voice was raspy, barely above a whisper, but the way he said her name, the rawness, the relief in his tone, was enough to send a shock of emotion coursing through her. Tears filled her eyes, rolling down her cheeks despite herself. She didn't say anything at first. She just leaned forward, brushing her fingers against his cheek. The storm inside her had quieted, replaced by something softer, gentler. She had been so afraid, so stubborn, but now sitting here with him, everything she had tried to protect herself from felt so unimportant. "I'm here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm here, Landon." Landon blinked, a confused frown creasing his forehead as he looked at her, still processing everything. "What happened?" "You were in a car accident," she replied, her voice soft. "You crashed during the storm." He tried to sit up but winced in pain, his body aching from the crash. Callie quickly reached out to help him, but he gently stopped her, taking a slow breath. "I'm sorry," he said, his eyes filled with more sincerity than she had ever seen in him. "I'm sorry I made you think I didn't care. I should have—" But Callie shook her head, stopping him. "Don't say that," she whispered, her voice trembling. Just, just rest." She sat with him, her hand still in his, as he slowly closed his eyes again, exhaustion overtaking him. She watched him with a soft smile, the tears still falling freely. Maybe, just maybe, this was a sign. A sign that they had a second chance. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but in that moment, sitting by his side, she knew she couldn't let go. Not this time. The sun had just begun to dip beneath the horizon, casting a golden glow across the small seaside venue. A soft breeze fluttered through the air, carrying the salty scent of the ocean. The sound of gentle waves crashing against the shore provided a peaceful soundtrack to the intimate wedding. Callie Monroe stood at the edge of the small altar, dressed in a simple but elegant white gown. There were no extravagant embellishments, just the delicate fabric that clung to her figure in the most flattering way. Her hair, once hidden behind the barrier of glasses and insecurities, was styled in loose waves flowing freely around her face. The absence of her glasses revealed her soft, hazel eyes, which now sparkled with a quiet confidence she had never known before. Her heart fluttered in her chest, a mixture of nerves and excitement. As she turned to look at Landon, who was standing beside her, her breath caught. He was wearing a simple black tuxedo that fit him perfectly, his blue eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her feel as though the entire world had faded away. The man who had once laughed at her, who had turned her world upside down, was now the man who held her heart. The man who had loved her, not despite her imperfections, but because of them. Their eyes met, and the world seemed to stop. "Ready?" Landon whispered, his voice low, but filled with emotion. Callie smiled softly, her lips trembling slightly. "Ready," she whispered back, her heart swelling with the unspoken promise that this moment was just the beginning of their forever. As they stepped into the center of the dance floor, a hush fell over the crowd. The same people who had once mocked her at her cousin's wedding now stood in stunned silence, their eyes wide with surprise. They had never expected to see Callie Monroe, once labeled as the awkward one, the ugly bridesmaid, as the stunning bride of a millionaire. Yet here she was, standing tall and proud, her hand resting gently in Landon's. The music began to play, soft and slow, a tender ballad that seemed to reflect everything they had been through. The once awkward, forced dance at her cousin's wedding now seemed like a distant memory. The cruel whispers, the mocking smiles, none of it mattered anymore. Landon gently took Callie's hand, placing his other hand on her waist as they began to move together, perfectly in sync. She followed his lead, her body pressed against his, their movements smooth and graceful. The crowd, who had once laughed and judged, now watched in awe as the two of them danced. Landon's eyes never left Callie's, his expression a mix of love, regret, and awe. He had fallen for her not just because of her outer beauty, though she was stunning, more than he could ever have imagined, but because of the woman she was, the strength, the grace, the kindness that had first drawn him to her were now more evident than ever. Callie's breath caught as she felt the warmth of his hand on her back, the closeness of his body. This was the man who had hurt her, who had made her doubt herself. Yet here he was, holding her with a tenderness that spoke volumes. She had once been convinced that no one, especially someone like him, would ever truly love her. But now, as she looked into his eyes, she knew she had been wrong. They moved across the floor, their steps effortless. There were no more doubts between them, no more walls. The dance they shared was no longer just a moment in time. It was a reflection of everything they had been through. The mistakes, the heartache, the misunderstandings, everything had led them to this perfect, quiet moment of intimacy. As the song continued, Callie felt the weight of the past slip away, the ridicule she had endured, the pain of feeling invisible. All of it seemed so distant now. In its place was the undeniable truth. She was loved. She was wanted. She was worthy of every bit of happiness that had come her way. The song neared its end, and Callie's heart swelled with emotion. Landon pulled her a little closer, his lips brushing against her ear as he whispered, "I love you, Callie. I've always loved you." Her eyes welled with tears, but she smiled softly, the tears shimmering like tiny stars. "I love you too, Landon. I always have." As the final note of the song played, they stood there in the center of the dance floor, holding each other close, surrounded by friends and family. The crowd that had once looked at them with judgment now watched with admiration, and as Landon kissed her softly, sealing their vows with the gentle press of his lips to hers, Callie realized that all of the pain and heartache had been worth it. Because love, true love, saw far more than appearances. It saw the soul, and in Landon's eyes she was finally seen. The world around them seemed to fade away as they danced. This time not as strangers or as a joke, but as soulmates who had fought for their love and won. And as the night carried on, they continued to dance. No longer the ugly bridesmaid and the millionaire, but simply two people who had found each other in a world full of chaos. Their love was the one constant, and it was all they needed.